welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on the program today, Nick Caley's press conference, his introductory press conference with the Houston Texans was yesterday, and I'm going to tell you why it should have you absolutely pumped for next season. A lot of good tidbits that we learned yesterday from him and DeMeco Ryans talking to the media, but off the rip, off the jump, I'm going to ask you this one question at the beginning of today's show, and hopefully, if the answer is no, I can change your mind by the end of the program today. But be real with me. Do you think Caley was the right hire for the Houston Texans? I, for one, for most of the coaching cycle, wanted the Texans to go after Chip Kelly. I'd be lying if I was saying Nick Caley was my first choice the entire time. But what say you? Do you think the Texans made the right hire with Nick Caley? This is going to be the pinned comment, so the very first comment in the comment section, scroll on down and reply to the pinned comment and be real with me. Give me your answer. I'll be looking down in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on Nick Caley. And I'm going to tell you why you should be excited for Nick Caley. First off, he is a leader of men. Everything that I've read about him, everything that I've heard about him, everything that everybody has to say around Nick Caley goes to the fact that he is a great leader in the locker room, and he's a great guy to kind of bring everybody together, and a good person that when things are down, when the chips are down, he's somebody that can take the reins and that can take control. This is some of just the immediate reactions after the Texans hired Nick Caley. Peter Schrager commenting, Houston Texans just got a great one in Nick Caley, rising star, McVay favorite, chose the Texans over other job opportunities. And then you see a couple, former Patriots kind of chime in Kyle Van Noy, Jason McCourty, who are saying, yeah, Nick Caley is a great coach, a great person, and the Texans made an awesome decision. And he just, in yesterday's press conference, described his passion for the game, and he's looking for guys with that same drive. And I think that kind of goes in line with what DeMeco feels on the defensive side. He's a very, jumping up and down the sidelines, running up and down, fist bumping, high-fiving, and that was on the defensive side, right? And whenever it was on the offensive side, we didn't really feel that same energy out of Bobby Slowick, right? Like, it felt like DeMeco was this pumped up, yeah, let's go. And then Bobby was kind of this kind of stoic figure on the sideline for a lot of the time. I don't think we're getting the same guy in Nick Caley in terms of how he conducts himself on the sidelines. And Sean McVay, his former head coach with the LA Rams, he was an assistant under him, had a lot of glowing remarks to say about Caley. This is exactly what he had to say. He comes from a great pedigree. You talk about a consistent approach to the core beliefs and the things that are in alignment with winning football games. His ability to communicate, his background and knowledge that he brought from his experiences in New England, but then also his willingness to be able to learn and have a good feel for the landscape of the league. Sean McVay, obviously I would say a lot of people view him as a top 5 coach in the NFL, and for him to say those things about Caley makes me feel really good about the decisions the Texans made. Also, another one of his former players, Hunter Henry, had glowing remarks to say. Obviously, he spent a lot of times with the tight end rooms, and Hunter Henry, a tight end with the New England Patriots, said, one of my favorite coaches I've ever had in my playing career. And he also went on to say he's a tremendous football coach, but not only that, he's also a tremendous person. So everything that I've seen around Nick Caley has been all positive, all great around him, and, just his character and his knowledge of the game. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, yeah, this dude, a lot of people like him. But, I mean, Sean McVay, we saw in that last quoted how he takes his experience from New England, everything that he learned, and kind of melded that with what McVay had going in Los Angeles. And speaking about his time in New England, that brings me to my second point on today's show. They're already in sync. There's already some sort of, level of comfortability with Nick Caley and this Texans front office and the rest of this coaching staff, because his ties with the Texans go pretty deep, right? He was a finalist for the OC job in 2023 where, Bobby Slowick ended up getting that role. He has a relationship with Caserio and multiple staff members on offense. I mean, we're talking about Ben McDaniels. We're talking about Cole Popovich as well. Those guys all, he's had relationships with all of those players, right? And this team wants synergy between everyone in the building. They want, everybody to be in lockstep. And I think bringing in Caley kind of fixes that issue of people worried about, Bobby Slowick not being able to lead the locker room. And shout out to Landry Locker. I was watching one of his shows maybe a week and a half ago. And something that he mentioned that kind of is stuck in my brain ever since the Nick Caley hiring was Bobby Slowick was never a position coach. Nick Caley was. And his relationships that he built, not only with the coaching staff, but also with the players, that's very important because kind of melding that, having, everything you need with the coaching staff and being able to work with them, but also on the same hand, being able to relate to the players. I think that's where Caley is going to excel, where Bobby Slowick just couldn't fit it. This is actually what Nick Caserio, the Texans GM, had to say on how the Texans want to operate. He was talking mostly towards the draft in this statement, but I think it applies to more than just that. This is what he had to say. My job is to help support the head coach, and because of my background, that synergy between coaching and scouting and personnel kind of was able to lend a different perspective. So we want the input of the coaches. They're intimately involved. What we try to do is pare it down and say, here, focus on this cohort of players and go ahead and go through your evaluations. Then we meet as a staff, and they give their input and perspective. Nick Caserio obviously wants to work in lockstep, not just DeMeco Ryans, but also the coaching staff. And then even though DeMeco in this press conference was like, the final decision was on me, I made the choice to bring in Nick Caley. It definitely helped that he had so many connections on this team already. He was already familiar with Nick Caserio, already familiar with guys on the Texans coaching staff, and I think that's why we saw a lot of the guys be retained this past year. It's very odd whenever a new OC comes in and you don't see any turnover at any position coaches. But that's basically what happened with Nick Caley. He came in and everybody else is pretty much the same. And I think it was funny when Caley was asked, how are you going to, change the system between what you did in New England, what you did in Los Angeles, and how are we going to build that for the Houston Texans? And he said, I'm going to do what's best for our players. We're not trying to pound square pegs into round holes, which I agree. I think that's a good mindset to have as an OC. Also, it's not that hard whenever you're coming from a same system, a same background. And part of the reason why they chose Caley is because year 3 of CJ Stroud, they didn't want to completely change the entire offense. They wanted new concepts. They wanted, maybe different ideas around this kind of Kyle Shanahan, West Coast scheme, kind of his tree, as well as Sean McVay. They wanted somebody from that same lineage in Nick Caley to where, yes, things are going to change, but it's not going to be a complete 180 of the offense. So, yes, he won't have to fit square pegs into round holes, but at the same time, this offense is somewhat already built for what he wants to do for this Houston Texans team. I want to hear from you, though, because I heard a lot of people complain after they went ahead and promoted Cole Popovich, who was the assistant O-line coach last year, to the head offensive line coach. They kept Gerard Johnson at QB coach. Ben McDaniels is still the wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator. They did bring in somebody from the Rams, Jerry Shaplinski, who was also with the Patriots before with Nick Caserio and Caley. So a lot of familiarity and a lot of the same faces on this coaching staff from last year. How do you feel about that? I have mixed opinions. I think it's good and bad because obviously it's nice to see that CJ Stroud's going to have some of that continuity, have some of those same guys in his ear with also some of the new ideas from Nick Caley. But it does worry me a little bit. I don't fully buy into the idea of, oh, yeah, Cole Popovich had no say in the O-line room last year. I find that a little bit hard to believe. Let me know your thoughts down below, though, in the comment section. While you're down there, I'm going to put the link to our friends over at Fanatics. All you got to do, go to chatsports.com/Texans hats, and they have a ton of different styles available for you. If you want maybe the snapback, if you want like a trucker hat, if you want a dad hat, they have them all there. Just go check them out. Do a little window shopping, once again, over at chatsports.com/Texans hats. You can peruse through. There's some great sales as well, just in time for the summer, right? It's going to get sunny. It's going to get a little bit hotter outside, and you'll want some Texans gear to be repping going into next year. So, once again, go meet with our friends over at Fanatics. That link is going to be in the comment section and description of today's video. It's chatsports.com/Texans hats. They even have the new logos as well on a ton of different hats and varieties. Go check them all out today. Like I said, get yourself fitted. You want to be stylish. You want to be ready for the start of the summer. What better way to do that than with a brand new Texans hat? Lastly, on today's show, why you should be excited for Nick Caley, the emphasis on protection. And this was a hot topic amongst a lot of people once he was hired of, all right, he's hired. How is he going to fix this offensive line? And how are we going to fix the awful protection issues that we had last year all throughout the regular season for the Houston Texans? And him being a position coach, especially a tight end coach, is going to come into play. This is what Caley had to say at his presser. He said it starts with the inside out, and then he also says it takes all 11 to protect the quarterback. All 11. That means all guys on the field. That's including C.J. Stroud, the quarterback, which I completely agree with. Obviously, you have the 5 guys up front, but multiple times last season, I saw where it looks like it wasn't ID'd correctly. There was an open blitzer on the backside or an open blitzer coming right through the middle. And I don't know if that was you didn't ID the mic correctly, it wasn't the correct protection, or if C.J. Stroud of this offense just got fooled by a false look and then they went ahead and gave you something else. But I'm hoping things can change, and I think Nick Caley being a tight end coach is going to come into play with how he fits the protection schemes. This is actually what former head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, John Gruden, had to say on tight end coaches specifically. I want you to hear what Gruden had to say. Well, I bet if we did a little data study of how many of the guys that become head coaches who were offensive guys coached the tight ends, because they knew the run and the pass. You can't put enough value on responsibility. That's your greatest capital. And I think him being a former tight ends coach is going to help in just that, because if you think about the tight end position in the NFL, you're a wide receiver. You're also a pseudo offensive lineman. Heck, even sometimes you can get motion into the backfield and then you turn into a fullback. So you are a jack of many trades. You have to fill a lot of different shoes as an tight end in today's NFL. And I think with Nick Caley knowing that, with him having to, work with tight ends in pass blocking, in run blocking, and on route concepts, that's going to help a ton going into this next season. Now, obviously, he was non-committal on any sort of roster question. Same with DeMeco Ryans, because they don't want to show their hand before the start of free agency. But I'm very interested to see how they change up this offensive line this offseason. Will we see 1 new starter, 2 new starters, 3 new starters along the offensive line? Who will they bring in, and will they try to fill those positions out in free agency, maybe a trade, or maybe in the NFL draft? Regardless of what they do, I can tell you this. We'll break it down here on the channel. Whatever happens throughout the entire season, throughout the entire year, the latest Texans news and rumors, you know where to go. It's Texans Today, your one-stop shop for Texans news and rumors all year long. Make sure you hit that sub button so you never miss a moment of Texans football.